I just tell people, if you're going to read about this hobby, buy some watches. I don't care what it is. Buy them ones that make you happy. When we vet an advertiser, we always ask, is there at least some group in the audience that will like this? No watches for everyone. We know that. And so that is the goal. But if you don't buy from the advertisers, that's fine. But you better buy something.
Greetings and welcome to this week's aBlogtoWatch Weekly. We are joined by, well, it's the usual suspects basically. So Ripley, Great Wall of Ripley, how are you this morning?
I'm good. How are you today?
Not too bad, not too shabby, not too shabby. David, sunny where you are?
Ish, major thunderstorms and crazy winds and rain and fall and all the rest of it. So it's pretty crazy, but it's gonna be nice today.
Good. Ariel, how are you this morning?
I'm good. I'm in Los Angeles. The weather is fair. Not great, but fair. And I'm excited to chat about watches.
I'm in a hotel room in Belfast, so apologies in advance if the audio is slightly more shonky than usual.
In some podcasts, that's actually punishment.
What, going to Belfast or the audio being shonky?
Just being, I'm locked in a hotel room.
In a hotel room.
That just sounds like an ominous opening.
Well, it's very nice here today. I have a view over the river to the Titanic place, and Girls Aloud, for those that's relevant to, were playing in the concert hall over the river from me last night, I think. But I was involved in neither. That is not my reason for being in Belfast. Although I did bump, not necessarily into Nico, but into Nico's shop, which was in the hotel we ate in last night. So, but Nico was not there. The shop was closed. So, Nico, I could have been and spent a load of money, but you were shut. So, there you go. But
Nico, open your store more often.
Yes, open late at night. You should be able to just have one of those. It's not really Pretty Women when you go and knock on the door and they rush out and open because they know you're there. But Nico, I demand better service for.
Is it a good idea for watch stores to be open 24 hours? Like, I think there could be something to this. Like, being able to buy an expensive watch as a weird decision at 2 a.m. seems more likely than 2 p.m.
What if they just put the boutiques next to the bars and opened, maybe 2 hours before the bars closed? So if you didn't meet someone at the bar, go to the AD next door and get your consolation prize.
It works in Vegas.
What, being open 24/7?
Well, I mean, so watch stores are open late. Like, there's certain cities in the world that you can buy a tourbillon at 2 a.m. And, mostly it's Asia where you can do this. But I just think that if you wanted to be there when the interest is there, again, late at night is just like, no one's like, it's brunch, I'm going to go buy a chronograph.
Well, I mean, we are going to touch on that little article you've done with WatchPro this week. Maybe that's going to be an alternative to advertising, is just being open, reconsidering your opening hours. I mean, how many watch boutiques are just not actually selling any watches? Would it be better for Rolex not to have any watches at 9 p.m. at night, or not to have any watches at 9 a.m. in the morning? Which is less annoying to be able to go in and not see the real thing, to be told it's display model only?
Well, let's talk about when you're getting the call. If you're getting the call that your Daytona has arrived and it's the middle of the day and you have to find an excuse to run out of the office at work, that's no good. At 4 a.m, if your AD rings you and is like, "Hey, buddy, your Daytona's here," you're probably not doing anything,
and you're not going back to sleep either.
What is the latest you've ever bought a watch, apart from, actually, internet included, worst watchmaking purchase decisions caused by late night? Oh, Ripley's clearly got a story. Ripley, what time did you buy that Breitling?
That was in the afternoon. But I mean, like, at what point? How late does it get till it's morning again, and then it's just an early purchase? I think I've gone full around the clock.
Ariel, any bad watch purchasing decisions at 4 a.m. in the morning on eBay?
So I think 11 or midnight was the latest I bought, like, in person. I couldn't tell you the latest online, but I have like a rule where there's a certain amount that I can't go over as one of those weird late night purchases. I have to like examine the combat. Like, how do I feel about it at night? How about during the day? How about the weekend? How about, and then I'm like, okay, all of these times agree I want this, because the heart can want at 4 a.m. what the heart clearly does not need at 4 p.m.
David, you used the excuse of it's a different time zone over there, so it's fine.
Yeah, that's actually true, but I've never used this opportunity to make a purchase because, to what Ariel said, I feel that way, but with a clear mind and just from one day to the next. And what I do is just put things in like in my notepad or whatever it is on Chrono 24 and just revisit them. And it's fantastic to see months later what I liked, a couple of months ago. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I almost bought this thing. Like, it's terrible. So
Okay.
it actually is. It's a good technique that might work for some of us.
So best or biggest near miss. So what's the watch that you almost bought and then you were like, I'm glad I didn't buy that? What's the pinnacle of that?
I'm sure it was some expensive Cartier or Breitling or something like that. Something that you would never ever be able to sell ever again. It's just like pour a bunch of money in it and then you'll never see that again unless you take a huge loss.
For me, it's always a watch that I like the looks of it, but I know I wouldn't wear. Like I wished I had a chance to wear it, but it's just good to have. It's like, I want this. I like the design. I imagine like a little pedestal I would put it on. I would see it, but I couldn't actually tell you one time where like, that's the perfect watch to wear. That's usually the ones that I gotta avoid.
Ripley, best near miss story?
I don't know if it's a near miss. I think this might have been a one I should have picked up now that I'm a Breitling guy. I was eyeing a large like 45 millimeter Hublot Classic Fusion. That's not even the size I want, but the price was really right, and it was there. So
Ripley, is there? I don't know if there's a dysmorphia whereby you think things in your body are either bigger or smaller than they actually are. Do you have an issue where you think your wrists are like 9.5 inches when in fact they're not, and you're buying all these 44 mil and 46 mil watches? Do we need to have a sit down? Do we need to have the chat? Do we need to have the chat?
No. It's a good time to buy the big oversized watch. So I mean, like, unless you just really, really only like small watches, it's okay to have some big ones, some small ones, some that actually appropriately fit your wrist that you wear most of the time. But it's okay to have some kind of outlandish pieces. And right now, everyone's into the small watches. So while everyone is overpaying for tiny, like, must-stick Cartiers, I'll go buy the Breitlings and the Classic Fusions now. And then, at some point, the market will swing back the other way. But right now, like, some of those big watches that are just very much out of style offer a tremendous value proposition.
Are you building in the cost of the anabolic steroids that you need to buy along with it, Lil Ripley?
Well, okay, so going along with what Rick said about size of your wrist, let's take a character like the Hulk who goes from small to big. Should the Hulk wear a very large watch for when he's big Hulk, or a small watch for when he's normal size and it just looks misplaced like his pants when he's Hulk?
The key thing is he needs one of those expandable steel bracelets. I can't remember what
they're
called.
The Spiedel is on there, totally.
Yes, from the 1970s.
Flexo Stretch or whatever it was.
Yeah, that's what you need.
Okay, but is he wearing a 40 millimeter or a 50 millimeter?
It's a tough one. I mean, which way do you go? I think I don't know. I think it probably needs to be one of those. Is it not was it Laco or Lange and Söhne? The original Fliegers that were 55 mil for strapping onto your Messerschmitt pilot's wrist. I think one of them is the way to go, with one of those expando bracelets.
That's the way to do it.
It's largest easy link. It's like.
I just feel like this is a missed opportunity in the watch world. We talk about the Hulk Rolex, but no one thinks about what Hulk would wear.
Would actually wear. Well, let's put a pin in that one for later on. The question is, if the Hulk was to wear something, would he want to wear something that said Swiss made on it? Would he be concerned? David is certainly concerned. Swiss made should never be printed on a watch part not made in Switzerland. Is this in particular reference to the dial? David, give us your starter for 10 on this, because I'm sure we'll get some mileage and some commentary on this one.
Yeah, I mean, it is a reference to dials, but also cases, or any part for that matter. But we see Swiss made stamped on dials and cases, foremost. But we also see them sometimes on bracelets and clasps. But my impression is that whenever a clasp says Swiss made, it's actually made in Switzerland, because the rest of the watch is also properly made in Switzerland. So it's very rare for us to see Swiss made on a clasp, and the clasp not coming. I'm not giving any ideas to all the sweatshops or something like that, but it's just, or OEMs I should call them. But basically the premise of this article is that it's just wrong in so many ways, and I think it's I managed to summarize it in this article rather well, because again it's a lot of smoke and mirrors. It's a very lenient legislation in the sense that it's very easy for manufacturers to put Swiss made on watches that have been largely produced outside of Switzerland and potentially outside of Europe. And so here I think Switzerland is relying more on its secrecy rather than its overzealous legislation to control. So that's just the thing.
To what extent do you think now that Swiss made means anything to the watch geek versus meaning something to the average watch consumer? I mean, do you think even watch consumers have put a value in it saying Swiss made on it? Or they put more of a value saying Rolex on it or Breitling on it? Actually, the Swiss made is less important.
Yeah. But brands have certainly become more important. But if you look at the most successful brands, most of them are actually proudly Swiss made and genuinely Swiss made. So it's that's a thing. I feel like the issue here is more of a ticking time bomb, in the sense that if and when this gets out in a way that can be proven with shipping information or supplier chain information or whatever else, then this might become sort of a scandal. I mean, and I bring up some other examples where industries have survived perfectly fine just after a scandal or two hitting one of their bigger brands. So I'm not saying that, this might be the apocalypse of the luxury watch, but it's kind of bad, and I feel like a lot of people will not take it the right way when they realize that the case and the dial and the bracelet and whatever else that they can see and touch in their $4,000 or $5,000 watch was made outside of Switzerland. That's also one of the bigger issues here.
Ariel, is there clearly a scale of watch brand responsibility? E.g., there are those that are more guilty of this than others.
I'll give you an interesting story. So I was recently in Switzerland visiting Victorinox, and many people in the world's experience with Swiss made is seeing Swiss made on their Swiss Army pocket knife. And part of the actually multiple presentations we had there was them distinguishing, not only does our stuff say Swiss made, but it's 90% Swiss made, not that other crappy Swiss made that some of the others put on there. And they actually said that there are, as of the time of the presentation, 360 companies that use the term Swiss made. I didn't actually know this.
Oh, right. Okay.
So that includes companies, I guess, like Victorinox that are very Swiss made and really try to get as much stuff made from around there. And then there's the more technical description of Swiss made that David has explained many times, which is, finally cased in Switzerland, and 60% of the movement value needs to be from there. And it's a very wiggly thing, which allows for a lot of this stuff to not be Swiss made. And I frankly just want the watch to be good, but I agree that there's this weird inconsistency in the terminology behind things made in Switzerland. In America, it's very explicit. If it says made in America, that is made in America. And most other countries like this. So for the exacting nature of the Swiss culture, for them to rely on such a wishy-washy standard is somewhat uncharacteristic. And I think that what consumers really want is just transparency. So a Victorinox that makes so much of the things that say Swiss made is actually somewhat embarrassed by what Swiss made means. I think that's probably indicative of a little bit of a problem.
Do you think that if Swiss made was more Swiss made, if the genuine percentage of Swiss madeness in the average Swiss watch was more Swiss, how much more expensive would they be? In other words, has this been is this about increasing the margin because it won't cope with an increase in price, and these are PLCs that need to show profit share growth, so the only way to do it is to cut costs because they can't put the price up sufficiently?
A lot of this has to do with Switzerland's very vocally isolationist way of doing business. They're very protective of their own supply chain and their own people and their neighbors. And they actually often say, support us because we're buying the more expensive things to take care of the high labor costs here, other than getting oftentimes an equally fine product from another place that has less expensive labor. But we live in a world where we promoted a sense of globalization, which is where you make supply chains more efficient and help places around the world, sort of everybody increase their standard of living. And Switzerland's whole take on this is no, not with us, not at all. We're not part of that. So it's a strange thing emotionally to want the item to be very well made, but the other time ask yourself, how important is it for me to protect specifically Swiss jobs? And to some people in Switzerland, that's a big deal. But to other people, they have to ask themselves, again, how valuable that is to them.
So what is the ultimate consequence? Because I think there was certainly a couple of years ago, maybe it was during COVID, where it seemed like because the Swiss had exported so much of the skill to a factory in China, that actually the factory in China was now getting ideas above its station, at least according to the Swiss, and was starting to go, well, wait a minute, we can do this ourselves. And there seemed to be a brief moment there where the Chinese started producing stuff that could be Swiss in its look. I mean, it was probably always Swiss in its quality or close to it, but some of the designs just weren't for a European market. I get the impression that slowed down a bit. I've just not seen what I thought may happen, which you get, many more Chinese brands popping up, pretending to be European and benefit from that. It appears to have slowed down. Is that because Swiss have seen the danger and have kind of signed better contracts, or just
David
brought
and
some of
I
the more expertise back?
Remember going to places like the Hong Kong Watch and Clock Fair, where you'd have a lot of these suppliers that do exactly what you said. They had clients that were those big brands, and then they had excess capacity, and they either use that to make watches for others or do sort of copycat things by themselves. This was also in a large way where elements of the replica industry came from. And so the Swiss really made sure that even if they're still continuing to do manufacturing in places like China, that they have either ownership of the factory or people that literally are working there on a daily basis to sort of oversee things. So they really clamped down on how loose a lot of the operations were, knowing some of the funny business that could happen. So they really, like I said, increased the level of controls there and just parted ways with a lot of these companies that would do stuff like that. And that was a period of time. So you're right. Like the first 3 or 4 years after a company stopped having that big Swiss client, they still have all these designs. So like, well, we have nothing to lose now. Well, we'll make all those copycats. And again, that still happens to a degree, but you're absolutely correct that supply chain oversight has vastly changed a lot. And they've clamped down on a lot of those possibilities for the manufacturers.
And does that just slow down the inevitable, do you think, Ripley? Because eventually people just leave these companies and might have a bit of finance behind them, they can just set it up themselves, or have the Swiss taken enough control that this now becomes less of a threat going forwards?
I think it'll be interesting to see what happens, because I think so much of the manufacturing is across the industry is carried over there in Asia, even if it's just on a rough level. And, tightening down on the supply chain and stuff, sure. But, people will get ideas, change things a little bit. You think about how hard it would be. These are watches. This isn't like a super, super proprietary technology. We're talking about like a metal case with a movement based on a lever escapement that hasn't changed in over 100 years. Like this isn't some groundbreaking stuff that like they couldn't reverse engineer and figure out. So if they're cracking down on the supply chain oversight, where that basically means things aren't getting backdoored as much, and it's just a little bit under control. But I think at this point, China and Asia as a whole, as a manufacturing side, is kind of the genie's out of the bottle on that side. It'll be interesting to see whether it becomes digs its heels in to try to make it, a prestigious manufacturing side of things, or if it continues to sort of operate in the space it has been. But I don't think you can just sort of tighten down on the supply chain oversight and expect, what's already transpired to basically be undone.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say watch this space for what happens in the Swiss watch industry, but frankly, probably nothing will happen in the Swiss watch industry. It will continue very slowly to emerge. Is there any undercurrent of tightening the rules? Like, I don't know which organization decides the definition of Swiss made, but is there any appetite for enhancing the definition rather
Brands
than
just come up
making it?
with their own terms.
Right,
Handcrafted
okay.
in Switzerland is the popular alternative now. There's other ones and things like that. Brands have their own seals, right? That's really a big thing. The Patek Philippe seal, Rolex's thing, Ulysse Nardin has a seal, which are attempts to add a further layer of legitimacy to the entire manufacturing assembly process. So those are the techniques that have done. Changing Swiss made, I don't know. Maybe. I just feel that right now it probably benefits the industry more to have it be a loose term as opposed to a tighter term.
Right. Well, let's see to what extent we think that this article that Ariel you penned along with our friends at WatchPro, the extent to which this maybe collides with the idea of how the Swiss watch industry treats Swissness, also with how it treats wanting to actually be. So on the one hand, it's like, we want you to know we're Swiss, but we don't want you to know that we're actually advertising the watch or that we're Swiss. We just kind of want you to know it. It kind of, be something that's just culturally assessed. Talk us through this article on WatchPro that you penned for Rob.
Yeah, so this is another long essay that's sort of the end of a series where I kind of complained to the watch industry about some of the mentality and culture they have around advertising and making decisions here. And David and I have chatted about this a lot, and we've encountered many times brands who actually say that they do not want to appear to advertise. And they're like, oh, we're really worried that people think that it's going to look like we're trying to influence a publication. So you know what we'll try to do, guys? We'll just give you money under the table and can you write nice things to us? I'm like, wait a minute. Weren't you worried about it looking like you were trying to influence the publication? There is a deep distrust amongst many parts of often the French, Swiss side of the watch industry in regards to how a consumer might perceive something that is advertised to them. Admittedly, I have not grown up in these places, but having traveled there for many years, I've never heard anyone say, it's advertised to me. How dare you expect me to pay money for it? I've never seen this at all. And in the United States, as well as many other, well-developed consumer economies, consumers don't just put up with advertising. We kind of expect it. There's very few things we buy that are expensive that haven't sort of spent most of our lives being advertised to us. Luxury cars are a good example. We spend, decades hearing about these labels before we ever get any. This desire has been built into us. It's not like we're, in our mid 30s and like, BMW, that's a thing? Cool. I better check that out. Like, we wouldn't care at that point. And so this idea that in order to look legitimate and sexy and in demand, they need to look as though they're not trying to get attention, I think is highly misguided. I think spending appears as though you are having fun. You are trying to communicate. I go quite deep into this. Rob from WatchPro kind of changed the title a little bit to make it sound as though I was simply talking about this fact. But my original title has the word foolish in it. And I say the watch brands are foolish for not wanting to appear to advertise, not only because of the obvious duplicity and hypocrisy of the statement, but also they have far more to lose by not communicating than they have by making someone think that that brand wanted their attention. Yes, you can have a hokey message. Advertising can go wrong, but it's as simple as just changing the message and people forget. That's one of the most fascinating things about advertising is that while people may remember a specific message, a negative sentiment can be eroded away immediately by just a positive sentiment. and then I spend more time talking about how this is one of several schemes that watch brands use to avoid any responsibility to spend money on the watch media, the independent watch media like aBlogtoWatch, that generates a lot of demand. So they're extremely happy when we're covering them for free, but they expect us to be like an operating utility, like the water or electricity. It's just sort of there. Hey, we have a release, we have an event, you guys are going to come, right? But when it comes to explaining to them the business model, which essentially consists of, you know, maintaining a work for editors and content creators and people that write about watches, they bristle at the fact that they might be responsible for this, and like, tell me why this is a good use of my money. I'm like, wait a minute, you just totally agreed it's a very good idea to be a aBlogtoWatch and the aBlogtoWatch should exist, but it's a bad use of your money to help ensure that it exists. That I don't understand this. And so
It is very weird.
It's a very strange
thing.
situation. The only thing I can do is hope that through articles like this, positive conversations will happen. Others will be able to transmit my message in culturally palatable terms that allow a larger spectrum of the decision makers in the industry to understand that this is a quite an urgent issue.
Yes, I mean, you talk about independent watch media. With respect to all of our fellow journalists, I genuinely think that of any scale, we might be the only ones left, because everybody else is selling the product. They're selling the stuff that they editorialize on. They're selling the stuff that they cover. They have a relationship with the sales manager as much as they do with the marketing department.
And none of them seem too happy about it. They don't seem happier as a result of it. And I'll tell you, and we know this, and Ripley can say this, and you can probably say, Rick, and David definitely can. The brands push this. They just sort of be like, oh, so how about we make a watch together that you sell? Like, I hear this all the time. Like, this isn't watch media like being like, oh, we've invented this amazing model. This is because the brands won't shut up about it. And it takes discipline and honestly a bit of long-term thinking to be like, wait a minute, this is not good.
Yeah, and it is, because it's such, especially in the market just now, it's such easy money. Like, it'd be very easy. Well, okay, maybe it's easy turnover. It might not be easy profit, because I don't know quite how profitable some of these relationships are for either the watch brand or the media publication, because of what it does to all the brands. And I think we are reaching peak collaboration. If we're not there yet, we ain't far away from the idea of, yes, we're producing another 300 watches of collaboration between brand A and media outlet B or personality C. I mean, now you see some of the watch names are now incredibly long because of the number of people that are involved in, yes, and I'm collaborating this because I'm taking my 25% or my 20%. You know, it's a watch brand and a media outlet and a personality and a famous watchmaker, and we're all doing this thing together. I'm like, is that really got a future? It might seem like a good idea at the time, but a lot of things that seem like a good idea at the time really turn out not to be. David, your experience of this, do you feel that it's different in Europe than what Ripley and Ariel experience in the States? Is it, you know, getting advertising, you know, having done it in the past, feels a lot more difficult speaking to the European-based representatives of the brand than the American-based representatives of the brand sometimes? Is that your experience?
Not really. I think it's really hit or miss. It really depends on the brand. Actually, sometimes, you know, a lot of the times what happens is if you're dealing with teams in Austria or Germany, maybe even France, you know, they are very professional. They have their own budgets and they are very performance oriented. You know, if fewer backups are needed, what you need is performance, what you need is reach, what you need is authenticity as a publication, and then you have a much better chance. Elsewhere, especially, you know, sometimes with HQ and whatever, it can be a lot more difficult. But, you know, to give you a very Europe-specific answer, I'm kind of surprised that it's not more different, because in the EU now, you know, everywhere for all the EU countries, all the publications are legally required to label any form of paid content. This was done to break down on the on advertorial and on deceiving content. And to be honest, I see a fair bit of watch content from European publications where I know for a fact that it's paid, and it's not labeled, and it's systematically not labeled. It's not as though it's just not labeled now or every once in a while, but entire brands and entire brands can have entire campaigns ran for year on end without any form of labeling, and
Same
that's
in the
really
US.
strange to me.
There's no
yeah,
enforcement. It's the problem on both ends. It's illegal in both places, but there is it would have to be reported. It would have to be proved. So, there's no police, and the only, place to really do anything about this is the courts, and maybe getting the attention of a federal agency. So brands just feel, and media, and look, in the U.S., they just follow the U.S. In the U.S., this has been illegal for a long time, but most of our colleagues were doing it for a while. And the European publications were just like, if they're getting away with it, we're going to getting away with it. I mean, like, they don't know how to have lawyers on their team, right? Like, they're not talking about this. They're just like, no one seems to be being punished for this, so we won't be punished for this. It's as simple as that.
And I think there also exists a pretty large gray area. So, it's one thing if a brand is, sponsoring an article or video or something that goes up on the site and it's just a standalone piece. It's another thing if a publication accepts a bundle of money from a brand in exchange to cover X amount, but there aren't any firm parameters as far as what that advertorial piece is. It'd be almost impossible to prove as an outsider looking in that one story that was realistically it was advertorial wasn't labeled as such, because there was never any agreement that specific deliverable was going to be, advertorial anyway. It was part of the agreed upon thing that, well, you're paying us and we're going to cover you X amount of things. So I think it's impossible to police even if the laws are in place.
And you make the point in the article, Ariel, which I thought was very obvious but also very insightful, which is watch brands seem to object to wanting the knowledge of the consumer, of the geek that's reading watch media, that they're advertising. And yet you walk into any airport and there's hundreds and hundreds of adverts for watches. Do we just need to help people join the dots that actually, even if we are not covering your brand, but your advert appears, in the middle of that coverage, people are going to take away the fact that, well, wait a minute, your brand, whether the person likes your watch or not, is supporting independent watch media. And that's a good thing. That actually, what we need to encourage brands to recognize is what their advertising is actually doing, in that it's maybe not just about their brand selling a specific watch, but it's about the feelings of the watch community towards, oh, wait a minute, brand X are advertising in this publication, aBlogtoWatch, and we know aBlogtoWatch are above board and everything else. Isn't it good that brand X are supporting this? And actually almost advertising that they are support, rather than just advertising their watches, let's have a brand advertise that it supports independent watch media, whether we criticize the watch or support the watches that they actually produce as the advert, rather than just tag Heuer.
The operative word is legitimacy.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact is, just like when you're buying any type of item, let's say you're into clothes, not all clothes are going to be good for you as a consumer. But when a particular brand advertises to you on a regular basis, you get the idea they've thought of people like me. They know that others like me have worn their clothes and been happy with it. Therefore, that's why they're trying to reach someone like me. That's why they would spend money to attract my attention, because they know that people like me tend to be happy with the product. So exactly as you're saying, advertising your brand to an enthusiast crowd adds legitimacy to the fact that you are enthusiast grade or enthusiast like you. If you spend no time targeting this audience, consumers are left saying, well, it looks like that product, and they sort of talk like those other brands, but because they're really not mentioned here at all, I'm going to think those enthusiast, guys, they're just not into it for some reason. I don't know. I'm going to focus on something that they spend a little bit more time talking about or that's advertised in those channels. And that's functionally what ends up happening. But we often muse about how detached the managers are from the realities of the marketplace. In the last couple of years alone, they've started to get their own stores and be involved with the consumer, and they don't pick this stuff very quickly. It's going to be years until they are saying these same things to us, and we'll be like, you guys, we've been saying this to you for a long time. And that's, David, again, will attest to that. How often, David, do we sit there and have to wait like a decade before we hear our words being repeated back to us?
Oh yeah, and it's too little, too late in so many ways. But it's extremely difficult to expedite these processes, and some of these WatchPro articles that the industry reads and pays attention to certainly help.
Yeah. So whenever you see advertising on a blog to watch, then bear in mind whether you like the watch or the brand that's advertising. Know that we're doing it honestly, straightforwardly. And even if you don't want to give the brand credit for the watch they're producing, they are supporting the rest of the media for the watches that you do like to hear reviewed. So give those brands a little bit of respect. You don't need to buy their stuff. We'd appreciate it if you did. I'm sure they would too, just to demonstrate that advertising works. But bear in mind, they're also supporting independent.
I just tell people, if you're going to read about this hobby, buy some watches. I don't care what it is. Buy them ones that make you happy. When we vet an advertiser, we always ask, is there at least some group in the audience that will like this? No watches for everyone. We know that. So that is the goal. But if you don't buy from the advertisers, that's fine. But you better buy something.
Let's move on to a phrase I never thought I would see Ariel write down, because I didn't think he believed in such things. But Ariel reviewed the Lange & Söhne Zeitwerk Honeygold Lumen and used the phrase, it's a worthy Grail watch. Ariel, I didn't think you believed in Grail watches, but has this changed your mind?
No, here's the thing. The whole point of the Holy Grail is supposed to be this rarefied thing, but people started using it to everything. And so not everything could be a Grail. Otherwise you entirely cheapen the term. This is one of those rare situations where I think that as a watch lover, you could put this high in the pedestal and you're like, that $100,000 plus watch that's crazy in how it's made and designed, that could be a Grail. And so if someone is out there, wearing a several $100 watch and pining for this Grail, I can sympathize. If it's some vintage sports watch I don't care about, I'm going to scoff at it.
You're just going to scoff at everything vintage, surely,
Mostly.
So tell me about this Lange & Söhne, and have you ever met anybody, or is there anybody in this conversation that doesn't like the Zeitwerk?
The Zeitwerk is not the Lange for everyone, and that's one of the reasons I like it. Like, I've never met anyone who's like, Lange? No way. Like, everyone seems to like the brand, but they definitely have their polarizing models, and this is one of them. And it's only really polarizing in terms of how it looks, and I will agree, it's not, aesthetically speaking, their most beautiful watch. It is, it's handsome like a well-made vacuum cleaner, okay? It's
and
definitely
that's why Lange & Söhne don't advertise with us. It's handsome. That's a strap line that we proposed to them. We said, Lange & Söhne, come and advertise with us. We recommend the strap line you should use is handsome like a vacuum cleaner.
I guess you guys don't appreciate classic vacuum design.
I just haven't seen your vacuum cleaner. It sounds absolutely breathtaking.
Ariel, pop out the room and bring your vacuum cleaner onto the camera.
The idea is that it's really function over form. The form followed the function, but the idea was to have a digital hours, digital minutes watch that worked instantaneously, that was accurate, that didn't have issues with power consumption. The models now are better than when they originally came out over a decade ago in terms of they've increased some of the reliability, especially the power reserve. It has everything you need. It's got the power reserve indicator on it. Watching it operate is incredible. It's really one of the neatest things to just watch those discs turn. It's just done in a really nice way, and they spent a lot of money and effort with, high speed cameras, watching to make sure they line up properly and testing it and doing it a bunch of times. For those that just like well engineered mechanical machines, there's just very little else out there that you can appreciate as viscerally and as visually as this. The constant force escape system had to be in there so that all the discs turn the right way and it doesn't destroy the amplitude of the movement. Again, all about practicality, but just finished so nicely and everything like that. And so I can see someone saying like, this is the accumulation of all my interest in timepieces, all rolled up into this. Now, I'm not saying I'd be happy wearing this every single day forever, but I love that they do this. This version is the luminous one, which means that there's a smoked sapphire crystal that allows light to enter so that when the numerals are visible, assuming there's enough light, they glow a little bit so you can see them in the dark. It uses their Honeygold alloy, which is a slightly different color gold, which has a very nice look. It's just a pretty look. Again, it's a cool watch. There's other elements of the story that I write about in there. But yeah, once in a while you wear a watch like that and say that's like a watch worth dreaming about a little bit every night.
Yeah, it was certainly one of my favorite watches. The only thing that started to ruin it for me is the gap. So there's a little between, like on the picture where it says 802, the minutes numerals, they're slightly stepped. And I do wonder if there's a way they could do it that, like, the far right numeral could just pop up a bit so that it's dead level. I'm not asking for much here, Lange and Söhne. Could you just take your £100,000 really complicated watch and just make it slightly more complicated for me? Just a wee spring that we just get those two numerals on the same level. I'm not sure how you do it. I'm sure it's possible.
Glossit Original figured it out. So they have a similar big date function as the Lange one, and on theirs they are level because they are concentric. Here they are not. They are overlapping a little bit. So it's been done, just not on the Zeitwerk and not on a
You don't really see it that much when you wear it, and I love that you had to throw in the little fact that if only that you would buy it. And I wonder if it was that, would you buy it? Would you put your money down? As long as it was to call you right now, be like, sir, we have the fix. Will you put the pre-order in?
Listen, I would put the pre-order in if I had the money for this one, let alone if they fixed it.
It would look very fetching on you, I'd have to say.
This has always been the pinnacle. I will take the Panerai off for the Lange and Söhne Zeitwerk. So, Lange and Söhne, forget about the conversation we've just had about journalistic integrity. I will shill for you all day long if you want.
I think journalists in the media space just take it all the way and have a bribery list. Like, these are the watches I'm willing to take, and I will do your bidding for you.
Yes, it's like one of those lists you hear about that, yes, I'll be completely loyal to you, my dearest partner, love of my life, except if I happen to bump into Julia Roberts or whatever. I will be completely journalistically integral, except if Lange and Söhne bribe me or, name your watch brand. Ripley, you seen one of these in real life?
I have not seen one of these. I love Honeygold and I love the Lumen stuff. You put those two in the same watch, and almost any model with those two features is going to be interesting. This one's super cool. I don't know if it would be the one Lange I would get, but I am a fan of it as a whole. But yeah, it's kind of like the one they released this year. It was a variation of a model we'd seen before, but you get Honeygold and Lumen and a cool movement all going on together. It's going to be a cool watch.
David, final thoughts from you on this?
Yeah, I've seen a fair number of these over the years, and it's incredible. I was at one of these events with Lange. I think it was at Villa d'Este, the Concorso d'Eleganza, and they had this exhibition there. And one of the top Zeitwerk guys from Lange, and we were just a conversation began, and we, like 30 minutes into it, we were talking about overlapping things and like geometries and the incredible engineering that goes into it. Because the moment you start to look into the precision required here to manage the torque and to make sure everything happens at the same time and all the rest of it, it's a wonderful world that lives within this movement. And once you can sit down with someone from Lange, especially someone who's actually part of the assembly process and maybe even the design and development, then you realize that this is the be-all and end-all in mechanical watchmaking today, the Zeitwerk. It really is mechanical watchmaking taken right up to the edge. A tourbillon compared to this is basically a Big Mac compared to haute cuisine. Is how I would describe it.
Good stuff. Well, before we move on to hit miss maybe, we're just going to do one more review, and I was particularly interested. This is something that you penned, Ariel, and this is about the Rolex 1908 Ice Blue, which seems to have been one of the watches that proved the most popular release at Watches and Wonders.
I feel like Ice Blue was like the color of the show, wasn't it?
Yeah. I'm particularly interested by your case for Rolex dress watches. People simply, well, is the DD a dress watch?
It's half a dress watch. It's also half a sports watch.
So give us your argument that says actually Rolex are doing the right thing in this kind of promotion of the dress watch. Why would you buy this over a brand that is more recognized in the dress watch world, especially if you're spending this kind of money?
I think actually that's an interesting question, because I don't know if that there's strong dominance here. There's like the classic ones. There's the Vacheron, there's the Piaget, there's the Patek, of course. There's these high end, beautiful, simple watches. Chopard is in there, and they're all sort of meant to be with the tuxedo a little bit. And I think those are the classics. Here, what we have is a watch that fits that form, but Rolex recognizes no one's wearing this tuxedo. You could wear it with a pair of jeans that could really uplift it. And so it's not a Datejust in its durable versatility, but I think it's way more versatile than your classic sports watch. The guilloche dial is a rarefied thing at Rolex. They do it quite well. It may not be something where there's like one artisan and one machine. It might be a little bit bigger than that, but they do it quite nicely. We have that color, which again only comes in platinum, and this is a platinum watch, so it's definitely something that you celebrate yourself. And then that movement has to be maybe the most beautiful industrially finished movement that I've ever seen. You have one of the rare men's watches with siloxy in it. This is the silicon hairspring technology that previously was only used in some select women's watches from Rolex. So you have sort of the watch nerd element and know that it's going to perform well. So what's also great about this, if you can have a bunch of other Rolexes or no Rolex at all and say, I still have room for this at $30,000-ish, it's not cheap. But again, looking at the competition, given the fact that it's platinum, I don't think it's unfairly priced in any way. And so if sort of there's like a whole inner collection for this, I think Rolex just gave you a strong value proposition, and it's probably won't be in as demand as, a Daytona or a GMT Master 2.
Ripley, when you think dress watch, what brand pops into your head first?
It'd be a Calatrava, Patek Calatrava. That's just like the quintessential dress watch in my mind. But you think a quintessential nice watch to the general public is Rolex. AP is a huge brand, but most people off the street might have not have heard of them unless you like showed them. They might have seen the watch, but might not know the brand's name. Everyone knows Rolex. But Rolex making tool watches almost doesn't make sense anymore. They're a luxury manufacturer. Back in the 50s, it could have been seen as a premium tool. But in today's day and age, they're luxury items. It's firmly a luxury brand. And so in that same spirit, digging your heels in and producing $10,000 to $20,000 stainless steel sports watches doesn't really make sense. A $30,000 platinum dress watch from the world's most famous luxury watchmaker, that makes a lot of sense. You can show someone a Calatrava at a party, and if they're not a watch person, they're not going to have any point of reference. Anyone sees a Rolex, they know it's a nice watch, but not everyone wants to be wearing a sports watch or a sports adjacent watch, like a Datejust or Explorer type of thing. So this really kind of, I think, for the general public and using the brand recognition of Rolex, a dress watch from Rolex makes a lot of sense. And as Ariel mentioned, when you look at kind of what this same amount could get you from the classic dress watch brands, or even, what it, it's twice the price of like a steel Daytona. That doesn't seem like bad value realistically.
So, I mean, is the problem here that really over the years, certainly in the last maybe 20 years, that Rolex have lacked the commitment to really push into this?
Yes, look
Like,
at the Cellini collection, man. That was like not what they needed. There was so much potential there. It kind of floundered. They didn't really give it the love it needed, but like there was something there. They kind of have always recognized it. It just didn't have that same history that any of the other collections have. You look at the Submariner, you look at the Daytona, you look at the Day-Date, you look at any of Rolex's famous collections, and they have basically looked the same for decades. The Cellini was their dedicated dress watch collection, and there is no design brief there other than precious metals. And there was almost like any idea could have been made at any point in time. So I think that's really the reason why it didn't really catch on. It was just sort of a mess. But I think now that they're giving it a bit of love and kind of giving it a more cohesive appearance that draws from the past, I think it's very well positioned to just be, step right up and be another, very well respectable offering within the space.
is that your impression, David, having spent time with Rolex, that they're actually going to have a real run at this for 10, 15 years, continually updating the models, presumably bringing in new complications, golds, other precious metals, other design features, that they're taking this to Patek or Piaget or whoever they perceive to be the competition in this sphere?
Yeah, the funny thing is, Ripley, you mentioned that the Cellini looked the same for decades, as though that was a bad thing, which it was for the Cellini, but usually it's high praise for most of the Rolex collections, which is kind of funny, right? It's like all of them look the same for 60 years, and that's great, but the Cellini looked the same for like 10 years, and then that's bad. And the reason why that's bad, and why I agree with you, Ripley, is that it was a bad design. The Cellini they launched actually not too late. I think it was like, I don't know, 2014 or something like that. So it lived less than a decade. Was that it was illegible. They quietly discontinued the black dial, more basic versions, because you just simply couldn't read the time on it without getting a migraine. You had the domed sapphire crystal that at the time lacked AR coatings, because Rolex again quietly began introducing those, I think, with the Daytona in 2016. And then roll it out on different models after that. So if you have, Rolex from the early 2010s, it's going to have a reflective crystal. And the Cellini had a domed crystal, which is even worse, and had shiny hands over shiny textured dials, and it was just a nightmare to read. And the sort of clientele who goes for something like this usually, even just instinctively knows that a watch should be legible, even though they are not watch experts or know what makes a watch legible or illegible. It still is a turnoff in many ways. And so I'm happy that the Cellini is gone. It's not going to be missed too much. The proportions were never that great, and overall it was just kind of bad. But the 1908 has this momentum behind it, as though Rolex actually thought, okay, we got to get this right, and we have to show the world that we can make a decent dress watch. And the proportions are much better. Legibility is fantastic, especially over this guilloche dial. Maybe that's why we go crazy over this platinum version, because this one is the real deal. And the regular, quote unquote, regular versions look kind of bland in comparison. This is a fantastic watch for low 30 grand.
Ariel, was it that it was a bad design, the Cellini, or was it just a terrible name? It's like,
well, it depends what generation.
Sea Dweller, Cellini. It's like Mario.
The Cellini
1908 sounds gutsy.
The Cellini did really well in certain markets that were not North America or Europe. I think the generation of the Cellini prior to it being discontinued, that sort of just turned into the 1908 with a different dial, was much better. I liked it a lot. Some of those older ones, going to the Princes as well, it was very hit and miss there. And yeah, a lot of the actual Cellini ones that said Cellini on it, those were from a different time. Those were like full on from like the late 70s, where there was a bunch of like tuxedo cocaine parties, and that world doesn't exist anymore. And so Rolex needed to adapt a little bit.
You don't get invited to that world.
I haven't been to any tuxedo cocaine parties that I can think about. And likewise, there's no reason to wear my black dialed illegible weird case Cellini from 19 whatever. But I think that, Rolex doesn't need this market, but they get so bored, they're like, let's do something we're not known for. And in a weird way, you got to appreciate that.
Good stuff. Right, well, let's move on to Hit Miss Maybe. Time is nearly done, so we're just going to do a couple of watches this week. First up is going to be, and I just want to say everything with a Mario accent, but first up is going to be the Jaeger LeCoultre. Jaeger LeCoultre adds the Polaris Geographic and 2 new Polaris colorways. I think the big question is really going to be, do we care, rather than is this a hit, a miss, or a maybe? I think they're beginning to get this watch right, but what do you guys think? I don't have my sign, so it'll be a thumbs up, middling, or thumbs down for me. 1, 2, 3, go. 2 maybes and 2 misses. Ripley, why do you agree with me that this is a maybe?
I like the collection as a whole. I think it, it could get a little bit more attention from the brand, so I like that they're doing things with it. The dial looks kind of a mess. There's just so much going on and just kind of anachronistically placed, and that whole thing around 6 to 9 o'clock. Yeah, there you go. Like that's better. So, I'd really want to see these in person. Try them on the wrist. Check out the dial finishing. There's certain things I like in there. I like the concept. But yeah, there's also things I don't like. So yeah, I reserve my final opinion till I get to see him in the metal.
Good stuff, David.
It was on Instagram Velocifile. Is a critique of certain watchmaking executions and designs and whatever, and he really beautifully summarized this as though as when a child is dressing in their parents' clothes. This is exactly that. I was looking at this watch and oh my god, how can this have that exact vibe? I cannot even begin to express how much this watch looks like that. And if on a more serious, I mean, this is pretty serious, but on a more specific note, it's just bad on so many levels. It's shocking. How can this be a thing? How could this be more than a sketch on a napkin? I have no idea. Honestly, it's unbelievable.
Ariel.
Quite the indictment from David.
I was slightly concerned for David's mental health there. I was afraid. That's why I moved on.
I mean, I'm looking at the same thing. Look at it.
Look, these are not terrible watches by any means. They're not. The current generation Polaris to me is not pretty, and I associate Jaeger as a pretty watch brand, and they've made a lot of very pretty watches over the days, and I appreciate them for that. From a utilitarian standpoint, the perpetual calendar and the 3-hand make the most sense. Look, the geographic, I mean, it's aesthetically, it's a disaster. It's sort of one of those things of like, I bet this style can put up with any layout. And you have this asymmetric, complicated to figure out what the hell you're looking at thing. And I don't want it because it's Jaeger at their best, they make these like weird tool watches, but like, here's in their mind, they're comparing it to the competition. They're like, but ours has the best features and best layout. And the problem is, as we sort of said, no one cares. Yes, this is technically speaking a very functional world time movement. It's got 2 times and 12-hour format. You got the AM, PM, even got the power reserve in there. And like, I appreciate it for all of that. But it's lost in the crowd. There's really no storytelling behind it. They've got to figure out how to make the style look a little bit more elegant. I mean, this is just not. I mean, we don't even have the right words. We're just like, wait a minute, there's something going on here. Like, you just can't do this. You just can't do this to us. So the Polaris in general hasn't been my favorite from an aesthetic standpoint. I just think it looks a bit on the basic side. And then when you sort of throw the asymmetry in there, it's just like, whoa. So like, if you handed me this watch, like, here, wear it, I wouldn't be like, how dare you? The good news is that Jaeger, and we detected this over the last year, the heartbeat is back. Okay, yes. They were full on in zombie mode. Okay, they were like, we don't know what's going on. Now there's a heartbeat. We don't know exactly when it'll fully wake up and start running around, but just something's happening there, and I think that that's very positive. So I want to be encouraging. Let's make the Polaris that really pretty sports watch. Let's look at Blancpain with the 50 fathoms, okay, which is like kind of in the same little bit price category. That's much older design, not nearly as fresh. But I bet like if you took a movement like that, put the 50 fathoms, people are like, oh, that's great, right? Because it's a much prettier looking thing. So I want them to get those hour numerals. Like they don't say over $10,000 watch. Those hands with the cutouts in there, this utterly unnecessary cutouts in there. Like it's a lot of it is kind of amateur hour. It's just trying to be modern for the sake of modern, and that's not what we really want the brand for. Because this is at heart kind of a retro watch.
Yeah, I think I'm not angry. I'm just disappointed.
I'm angry, and it doesn't even have a date. How can a travel watch not have a date? I mean, you're looking at this mess, and you forget that there's no date.
Because no one can ever agree what the date is associated with, which time zone. That's the problem.
Others have figured it out. I mean, literally,
they just choose. They just choose.
Watch. Yeah, well,
I agree, but Shazera, they couldn't figure it out.
Give it 2 date windows. Give it 2 date windows. You've put everything else on the dial at this point. Like, why not? Go. For it.
If you do that, if you flank the other side of the sub dial with a little circle there, and then you had another window adjacent to the power reserve indicator, yeah, you could add 2 dates and make it look cool and symmetrical. Boom.
What's through the square window? What's through the round window?
Just numbers flying everywhere.
I did give it a maybe because at least the perpetual calendar came out the crazy. Has anyone ever done a crazy date
just
watch?
Numbers.
Frank Muir, crazy hours. What about crazy date? The date just randomly appears somewhere.
Yes, crazy calendar.
But
crazy calendar.
Funnily enough, random numbers flying everywhere. This watch, for whatever reason, has 15 and 45 written next to 3 and 9. But nowhere else. Just in case. It's just so random.
Okay, David's not had enough sleep.
I'm losing it.
I was at least grateful that perpetual calendar does keep to my particular definition, which you're going to have a perpetual calendar do everything the same way, either all hand indicators or all windows. I will let you off with the year. The only thing is, why are they still producing a perpetual calendar that requires a pusher? IWC sorted this out years ago. Come on, Jager, at least make it.
Or they will not let them have it.
Oh, and that's more than one pusher. That's not a one pusher case. Okay?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Well, now that we have judged that, let's judge a version of the watch we were just referring to, and this is from IWC, the Portugueser. This is hands-on, re-engineered IWC Portugueser Perpetual Calendar 44. David, you got to handle this. Give us the lowdown.
I mean, it's not crazy new, but as you say, it does have the familiar IWC Perpetual functionality. You set everything through the crown. You cannot set it backwards, so you got to be careful with that. It's beautifully made, truly, genuinely. And I read this in the article, and I mean it. When you're looking at this watch, you're not thinking of any other watch, and I think that's kind of cool. It's just that sort of watch. You buy it, you wear it, and you're not like, oh, I wish I had a date, or I wish I had this or that. No, you look down on your wrist and you'll see this watch. It's all that you need, and probably a lot more than that.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's give it some judgment. So, on the count of 3, a hit, a miss, or a maybe. 1, 2, 3, go. 3 hits, but a maybe from Ariel. Ariel, tell us why it's only a maybe.
So I wrote a separate article on just the blue version of these that hasn't come out yet. David and I both enjoyed them. I think part of the maybe is I always ask myself, like, do I need a perpetual calendar? This one has a lot of benefits to it, but it's thick. I mean, it's a very thick, big watch. They sort of redesigned the Portugueser case a little bit. It looks better. It looks better. I still am not 100% convinced that IWC cares about legibility with the hands. The ice blue dial, another ice blue dial, or horizon blue, that's what they call it, horizon blue, is a little bit better. The black dialed one, I mean, in the right picture, it looks super legible, but David can easily say, like, half the time, you can't see what anything says on the dial. So, plus these are all gold. right? And so I think that this with that blue dial and steel would be awesome. But this is, these are expensive things. So I again, if I was in the market for a large size perpetual calendar, this would be very, very high on the list. And if you are, big budget, big risk, this is the total way to go. I would just love to see this a little bit more legible in the dial. I think they could play with the finishing a little bit more. And again, I'm being picky because this is a $50,000 plus, gold luxury timepiece. Good in a lot of ways. With some tweaks, could be perfect.
Ripley, why was it a hit for you?
I like the Portugueser collection in general. I feel like it has its own identity, which is sort of hard given that it's not a very distinct looking watch, but yet it is. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have some crazy bezel or K-shape or some gimmick that makes it distinct, but everything from the collection just kind of looks like it's part of the collection. And I think this is just a very pretty looking perpetual calendar. I like when IWC does dressy stuff, because we so often think of them as like the pilot's watch or the ingenieur. So I think it's just a pretty looking watch, a good evolution to the existing previous one.
Da Vinci forever.
Mario. Da Vinci.
And since I'm a Breitling guy, the case size doesn't bother me whatsoever.
Exactly.
It properly fits.
I was going to inquire as to whether this was now the new norm for you, Ripley. David, why was it a hit for you?
Yeah, I quite like the black dial, precisely because the finishing and the legibility is really good on that, surprisingly. I agree with Ariel that it's not perfect on the bright blue dial. Usually black dials with shiny golden hands and hour markers and whatever are terribly illegible, but this one is beautifully legible. It's a really badass looking watch in red gold with a black dial, bang on. The rest of the other versions are nice, but that one is an absolute killer watch.
Good stuff. Well, I give it a hit. I mean, it's just a hit. It just is. It's just an awesome watch. The right size. Everything's organized properly. And I agree with David. I find the black one is actually quite legible. Quite expensive, but quite legible. But there you go. There's a cost for legibility, I guess. So that is us for the show this week. Gentlemen, what are you up to in the next week or so, Ripley?
Just trying to get some of these hands-on reviews sorted before I head over to New York for a few days for a friend's engagement party. But yeah, we're still in peak sample season, so next one in queue is a very tiny Casio.
A very tiny Casio. We're going to get a size comparison for Brightman?
Yeah, I think I've hidden the Casio under my Breitling, in fact. It's quite that small.
Good stuff. David, next week, ahead in watches, what is it?
I'm just about done explaining Lucent Steel for the 100th time because I want people to understand how amazing it is. And I had a Chopard Mille Miglia now in Lucent Steel, and it's fantastic. So I'm 2,000 words into it at this point.
Excellent. And have you reviewed the watch yet, or is this all just about the steel so far, the 2,000 words?
I managed to sneak a few words in there about the watch, yes.
Good stuff. Ariel, your favorite kind of steel?
Oh, wow. My favorite kind of steel. What does Rolex call theirs again?
Oyster steel. Omega has
Oyster
Omega steel.
Oh, my God.
But Oyster Steel was the first joke one because it's more or less the same as the others, but everyone else started using 904L steel, and Rolex got upset, so they just had to say Oyster Steel just because they wanted to be different, and that's what makes it special. I call it Spite Steel.
Spite steel.
That's my favorite kind of steel.
Great stuff. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Do check out Ariel's other podcast, Superlative. Ariel, do you know who's up next or what episode's out just now?
I know who I'm recording next. I actually don't remember, but the one this week is Adrian Taskin of Luxury Bazaar, who's quite a popular personality himself. So people are enjoying that episode. So please have a listen, and thank you for pointing it out.
Great stuff. Go and check all that out. If you need to contact the show about anything, email us podcast@aBlogtoWatch.com, and we'll see you all in a week or so's time. Goodbye.
Bye everyone.